Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. The BBC have reported on how funeral prices have risen. The Competition and Markets Authority claimed that the average price of a funeral in 2018 was £4,271, whereas the average cremation fee in 2017 was under £1,000 at £737. There has been an extremely alarming rise in costs over the last 10 years for funerals. The average funeral price was reported to have risen by a massive 68% in the last 10 years. However, crematoria fees have risen by around 84% in the last 10 years. Looking at the rise of our final resting places from a slightly different perspective, on average, a low-income family would have to pay up to 40% of their annual outgoings on their funerals. Co-founder of the comparison website Beyond explained that, quote, "It is still true that very few people, only 4%, actually shop around, often because of a very British taboo around death and being seen to shop around for funeral prices," end quote. Are we, the British public, perhaps a little bit unsure about organising a funeral and how much it actually should cost? Are we actually going to shop around and look into it enough to know when we are being ripped off? Especially when we are vulnerable as we are going through the grieving/mourning process. We are very much so in a very exposed state whilst we are grieving for the death of a loved one or a friend or anyone close to us. So of course companies are going to see this and take advantage, and it's very, very wrong. However, they know that more than likely these people aren't going to shop around because they just want their loved one put to rest. And of course, when somebody is grieving, it is very, very difficult to make decisions like funerals and organising a funeral and what goes into all of that. Are we as Brits just a little confused about the whole funeral process and where to get the best prices? And like I said previously, do we know ourselves when we are getting ripped off? We need to be able to feel like we are capable and we are allowed to shop around a little bit and see what we can get with other funeral companies. Don't just go for the first company that we set our eyes on. And I hope that makes some kind of sense. And, you know, perhaps we, the British public, are quite confused and a little bit scared about organising this big massive funeral, as I've mentioned, when we are not in a good state of mind. I think much of the reason for this confusion and whatnot is not only because we are grieving, but it lies with the lack of transparency between the funeral companies themselves and their clients. Many believe a full investigation on the rising price of death is very much needed, and this thorough investigation is now actually going to take place. A rather interesting article from the BBC explores death and the process that we actually go through at the end of our lives. It explains that scientists are expecting an increased amount of deaths in the coming years due to people living longer. Research shows that the majority of people wish to actually die in the comfort of their own home, which did not surprise me whatsoever. However, unfortunately, most people pass away in hospitals or care homes, which to me, that made me quite sad, that statistic. We need to remember that those who are grieving are vulnerable, they are at an increased risk of being taken advantage of, and I think the question that many are asking is, how on earth did prices manage to rise this much before an investigation triggered? And also, how much is too much for a funeral? We are not a culture that wishes to be very open about death. It's very important to know what your partner or whoever has passed away wants. I think it's very important we know where we stand, and that, I think, reduces a lot of stress in itself if we are just open and honest about what we would like, if it is possible, of course, for our funeral. I hate talking about death. Honestly, me and my mum have spoken about it, and I can't bear the thought of her not being in my life, you know. It's of course a very sensitive, horrible thing to discuss with a loved one or anyone who is close to you in your life, but it's definitely worth talking about. So we need to be more open with things like this, as I do believe that it could possibly help. So thank you so much for listening. I hope that you found this video useful, or you learned something perhaps. If you did, make sure to leave this video a big thumbs up. If you are new here, click on that subscribe button, and I hope to see you in my next video.